VPK, please confirm if you can see my screen.
Yes, I
Okay.
can see your screen and all good.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And welcome to everyone to the first session of year 2023 and doing it under the banner of Chandigarh VMUG. We are quite excited today that we have got a lot of familiar faces again and a lot of new faces. I'm actually expecting few more people here to join. But that's okay. Anyways, this session will go live as well, will go on YouTube, so people can watch it at their own speed. So welcome again. And before we start, I would like to get some housekeeping rules. So if you're not speaking, please keep your microphone on mute. And again, if you have any queries, please feel free to ask myself, Prasanna, Akshay Kalia, or today's presenter is Mohammed Bilal. So feel free if you have any queries to put in a Q&A section, and we'll take up those queries at the end. By the way, we can take it in between. So let's try to make this session more interactive. Very cool stuff coming in for today's session. By the way, if you haven't registered for this VMUG, please go ahead and register yourself. We have got a lot of goodies today, thanks to VMUG for that. And we will see who is actually keeping the session interactive. And based on that, we'll pick up a few names from today's session, and we'll dispatch those goodies to them. So, quick introduction about Chandigarh VMUG team. Myself, Pratik Dugal. I'm the VMUG leader for Chandigarh. I can see that Akshay is looking for the title here, but yeah, got few fancy titles now. I'm also representing Clouds Eye here as well. And PPK, who was my friend a few weeks back, he's my partner as well at Clouds Eye. So we'll provide more info about Clouds Eye maybe at a later stage. But yeah, Clouds Eye is ready to fly, and soon we'll share more info around that. One thing I would like to share with everyone that Chandigarh VMUG has received an award from VMUG last week. So kudos to everyone who is part of Chandigarh VMUG community. And I'm sure this year as well, we are in a position to receive some more awards from VMUG. And the second news about VMUG here is that I nominated myself for the regional champion for APAC, and I've got that position as well. So being a regional champion, I'm responsible to handle. Uh, I'm kind of voice for VMUG leaders across APAC, so including Chandigarh VMUG. So that's like a good move for Chandigarh VMUG here. And we have Prasanna here. He's also a VMUG leader, and he has recently got his V Expert title. And I'm so sorry, Akshay, I didn't knew that how many V Expert titles you are carrying, so I just kept 2023 here. But I'll prefer making that change in the next VMUG session.
Okay, Pratik, as a matter of fact, this time I forgot to apply.
But anyways, I mean, being a VMUG, because you are supporting VMUG, I'm sure you must have got that V Expert title as well.
Yes, in next application cycle, I'll apply. I'll be the expert 2023 next cycle.
by the next VMUG. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So that's it for Chandigarh VMUG team, and this is the agenda for today's VMUG. Will introductions already done, so I'll tell some information around VMware and VMUG, which is quite important for everyone. And then I'll request PPK to talk about SuperCloud. So nowadays, this is a buzzword. Everyone's talking about SuperCloud, and I really wanted to listen kind of a story behind SuperCloud. So in kind of 7-8 minutes, 10 minutes, we would like to get that information from PPK, and then we'll pass it on to Mohammed Bilal, who is a senior consultant at VMware, and we are very, very lucky to have him on board today. And if we'll get some time, last 5-10 minutes, we'll do some chit chat, virtual networking, and also talk about the giveaways. So these are the two links actually I wanted to share with everyone. So that's around VMware and VMUG news. So for the VMUG here, there's a event happening on March 9th. So VMUG's celebrating this as a cloud day, wherein a lot of presenters are coming in and they'll talk about different sessions. So I would request everyone to register for this March 9th event. It's free. And as you can see, a lot of kind of sessions happening like around VMware Cloud, around the VDI cloud services. And I'm sure these sessions will be very, very interesting. So if you have VMware in your portfolio and wants to know more about it, like let's say VMware Skyline, and uh, very rarely people know that it's free. So Skyline, like each product is free here under VMware Skyline portfolio. So I think people who are consuming VMware, they should start kind of enjoying all these services from VMware that's already there under your support subscription. So if you would like to know more about VMware Skyline, VMware Area, we have expert here with us, Pavan Naidu, who gave us info around VMware Area in our last session. So like similar sessions, kind of a deep dive as well. If you would like to know more about it, so that's the registration link here. You can either take a screenshot, otherwise once this video will go on YouTube, you can pick that link from here. Otherwise, just type in March 9th Cloud Day VMUG Virtual. You will get the idea there. And now something around that VMware 25-year story, Akshay, you were keeping that information with you. So I would like to share this link, very beautiful link with everyone. So some of us will be able to relate our journey with VMware here. And I won't say that Akshay was here like 1998, but somewhere down the line, Akshay, PPK, Pawan, and a lot of other people, they'll be able to relate themselves with this story. So story started in 1998 till 2023. VMware has completed 25 years, and you can see, I mean, some of that information like vMotion and vCenter server journey from ESX to ESXi and all those things, like when the first VMworld happened. So you will be able to see all that information, um, uh, some information, like very, very nice information. And they are actually very nice videos they have kept in here. This one's quite nice actually. So yeah, I would request everyone to go to this link and explore around like VMware's journey from last 25 years. And end of it, actually, you will see that VMware has done a lot of acquisitions here. But let me just take it to the end, around 2023. So they are not ending at 2023. The last one will be like they're talking about 2030 agenda. So if you're keen to know what's VMware's portfolio currently and where VMware is going in next, let's say, 10 years, in next decade, just scroll, just explore all these options here. Very handy, nice link here. So that was all about the VMware and VMUG news from my side. And now I would request Prasanna to jump in and tell us some information around super cloud. That's like a buzzword for all of us. Prasanna, over to you.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
All right, yeah. SuperCloud, to talk about SuperCloud in 10 minutes is really hard. So I made a few bullets, and I'll probably make sure I cover most of the bullets. Right?
That's a
I'm not sure
challenge
if
for
I'll,
you. That's a challenge
yeah,
for you.
I'm not sure I'll be able to cover all that. Right? What's the buzz around SuperCloud? Right. And I'm sure Pratik, Akshay, Pawan, Bilal, and some of us who have been in the software industry for about 15, 20 years now, We have seen, we have been in, we have architected, we have supported customers, we have helped support enterprises, design, develop a lot of different types of solutions for many enterprise customers, right? And we have seen the architecture evolve over time from the shortcomings of existing infrastructure and also to expand to the new technologies and capabilities with all the advancements, right? Be it the architectures from past, from just having local data center or just the data center, and having a co-location, and to span the data center and infrastructure to co-location. I know for sure this was our predominant infrastructure prior to the evolution, cloud evolution that was somewhere around 2010 timeframe, right? Then came the buzzwords like private cloud, public cloud. With that, private cloud, public cloud, people started talking about IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, and eventually somewhere VMware said XaaS, right? So in between, we saw something called hyperconverged solution from VMware, Nutanix, and some others. Well, in this session, I'll be talking about some names and references. Those attributes are all in the slide, and all the trademark belongs to respective owners. None of them is related to this talk. Okay. With these types of convergence, we also saw cloud and cloud bursts, and architecting solutions for cloud was not same as how we did back in the data center world, right? And also there were few challenges. A lot of people had hesitance accepting cloud. Do I want to place everything on cloud, or do I want to give away running everything on cloud? So the acceptance of cloud computing and the security, how it evolved, from there we got to a point where a particular cloud provider could not provide all the solutions to all the cloud computing needs, right? Um, so the needs were ranging from having geographical footprint, um, availability of services in all the regions, security concerns, identity and access management needs. For some workloads, like some workloads are latency sensitive and require high performance compute needs, and licensing model, billing, costs, budgets, all this, right? And most importantly, the support for modern workloads like 5G, telco cloud. Not all cloud providers have telco cloud, and associated business services for telco vendors, right? And IoT, even the managed services and support for cloud native applications, and even machine learning and AI workloads. So not all cloud vendors could provide all this back in the day, right? And to add to these needs, there are mergers and acquisition between the companies, right? A company getting acquired may be running their workloads on a particular cloud vendor, and when they get acquired, the parent company may have different cloud vendor and may have workloads to specific regions, um, to adhere to those specific regulations, regional specific regulations, be it with data privacy, data localization, governance, data protection requirements. All this made it difficult to select just one cloud vendor, and one cloud vendor for my company is never that's the thing. And also, some cloud vendors were very advanced in bringing up new solutions to take advantage of newer technologies as the business expands, and addressing to the needs of varieties of domains such as banking and finance, pharma, oil and natural gas, healthcare, and geographies that I spoke about, like Europe, US, ANZ as a region, and Indian subcontinent is quite large. We have a large customer base here, right? These things led businesses to choose more than one cloud solution to address their technology needs, right? And that eventually resulted in a scenario where you have multiple clouds for same type of workloads, right? For example, if you have a data center running private cloud, you may be using Hyper-V as well, Hyper-V, Nutanix, and VMware, right? To cater to your just private cloud needs. And for hybrid cloud, businesses may have VMware on-prem and they may have VMware on AWS or on any cloud, right? Similarly, for hybrid cloud, they may use AWS Outpost along with AWS public cloud. They may use Azure Stack with Microsoft Azure, something like that, right? With all these enterprises, they have deployed solutions across various different clouds. Uh, and in fact, I mentioned about not all cloud vendors provide solution for everything. Some customers chose VMware for their on-prem needs or private cloud needs. Some of the federal workloads, they went on AWS Gov Cloud. For AI and ML, some of the customers preferred Google Cloud, right? And in fact, some of the workloads even span across the clouds, right? I'm not sure many of you might have heard about Snowflake SnowGrid, which is said to be the super cloud, or to some extent MongoDB Atlas as well, which spans across clouds, provides the same MongoDB DB Atlas experience across all the clouds, right? The last two examples about SnowGrid and MongoDB does not really address all types of workloads, right? For variety of workloads, the administrator or the developer or architect may still need to learn new technologies, log into different cloud management portals, use different CLIs, APIs, SDKs, architect solutions differently for each cloud, right? Uh, this adds to the existing challenges that I just spoke about a few moments ago, right? So all this, having said about all this, this leads us to something called super cloud. So what is this super cloud, right? For super cloud, there are other buzzwords as well, like cloud on clouds or hyper clouds, or some may call it interclouds or meta clouds. And some of them interchange these words, but they may all have same or similar definitions. What is it? It is basically a new way of addressing the challenges to solve the cloud computing needs. It's not one single platform provided by any one vendor, nor it's a single architecture that addresses all the cloud computing needs, right? The industry is still trying to see how best they can use cloud solutions available to address a variety of architectural and business challenges with multiple clouds, right? Super clouds could be the new way to architect a solution, or a unified approach to use APIs, a common set of APIs, and then those translate or act as a middleware to invoke other APIs, right? A super cloud could be the architectural model for cloud services based on the idea that combining many different individual clouds as a one unified resource pool in terms of on-demand operations or something like that. So super cloud simply is to make sure cloud could use resources beyond its reach, take advantage of pre-existing contracts with the current cloud providers, be it one cloud providers or multiple. So one such super cloud, or predominantly talked about, is about Walmart, right? Walmart has Walmart Cloud Native Platform, which they call super cloud, in which they use off-the-shelf Kubernetes and have built integrations, solutions, and services around. They use this architecture, they call it triplet architecture, with on-prem, Azure, and Google Cloud combined. They use these three. They don't use AWS for obvious reasons. So that's kind of an example of super cloud. I have in this slide deck, I have included a few links, videos, and references. I would recommend any of you interested, you can go on these links and read about super cloud and learn how next generation architectures are evolving. And of course, vSphere 8 could be one of the stepping ways to get there with Tanzu and other variety of unified approach to get your workload run on any cloud. So with that, I hand over to Bilal. Bilal, over to you.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks, PPK.
Yeah, thanks, PPK. Bilal, before you go ahead, I would like to steal like two minutes of your time from your bucket. PPK, one question for you. So, Super
Yep.
Cloud, is it like kind of you are getting best of every best from every cloud provider under one user interface? Would that be a right thing to say? Yeah.
Yes, some of them using Super Cloud, they have built a portal and they provision workload, and that workload determines which is the best or most suitable cloud to deploy the workload. And it also determines suitable workloads based on the region, the size of the workload, be it the storage workload. If they want 10 petabytes, maybe it chooses some object storage online, right? Which with the contract already knows that a particular cloud vendor provides 10 petabytes for this storage contract or storage account. I know by default Azure has 5 petabytes as default limit or maximum limit per storage account. So if you have to go beyond that, then you have to talk to Microsoft and get that quota expanded. Like that, for compute workload, for storage workload, be it the resources available also. For example, if I want to run ML workload in a particular region, a particular cloud provider may not be having their services, compute services in that region for AI ML workload, or I need a large GPU. Maybe in a region like new region that comes up, say in Mumbai or in Chennai, they may not have all the services available. So the super cloud will be the unified portal. I select India as a region, then it determines which provider has the capabilities, and then provisions the cloud, provisions the workload there, or provides you the set of APIs that you can use in your application, and the application will in turn run in that particular cloud. So that's kind of high level, it's very transparent to the developer. They don't have to worry about billing costs, where it's getting provisioned, is it closer to the user, is it far enough, and all that. Yes, kind of a unified approach maybe.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot, PPK, and thanks for all these links as well. So if anyone wants to take a screenshot, feel free to go ahead. And now over to Bilal. But before Bilal, you take over, and we know that you'll be talking about what's new in vSphere 8. So I would request you to keep it at a level wherein everyone can digest this part. So there'll be few people who already know vSphere 7 here, and for them it will be kind of an add-on. They would like to know what's new here. But there'll be few people who are new, who might be new to VMware vSphere here. So yeah, so few things about you here. You are working as a senior consultant at VMware, and 14 plus years of experience in IT, where in 12 years you have worked with VMware, and your core competencies are around designing, architecting, planning around SDDC and cloud, and you have got a lot of certifications in your account as well. So very glad to have you on board here, Bilal. Over to you, and I think you're already a host here, so feel free to share your screen.
Sure, thanks, Pratik. Let me share my screen. Okay, thank you. I think you need to stop sharing.
Okay. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this VMUG session, where we'll look at the highlights of what's new in vSphere 8. My name is Mohammed Bilal. I'm a senior consultant here at VMware. So let's just dive right into it. Our agenda for the next 45 minutes or so will be We'll discuss the vSphere Distributed Services Engine. We'll look at some of the new enhancement in vSphere 8 in the areas of vSphere with Tanzu and lifecycle management. We'll look at how vSphere 8 can help better prepare you for using artificial intelligence and machine learning workloads. And we'll look at some enhancements in the area of guest OS, resource management, and security. So first let's talk about the vSphere Distributed Services Engine. So you may have heard about this a couple of years ago when this project was introduced, which was called as Project Monterey. And this has evolved and will GA with vSphere 8. vSphere Distributed Services Engine unlocks the power of data processing units or DPUs for hardware accelerated data processing to boost infrastructure performance. And vSphere 8 makes using these DPUs very easy for you to use in your workloads. So what is a DPU? A DPU is a data processing unit. It exists today and it lives in the hardware layer, and it's like any PCI device like a NIC or a GPU. The DPU contains some compute, storage, memory, and network interfaces, and they can also be referred as smart NICs. And today our networking, storage, and host management services run in instances of ESXi virtualization, the x86 compute layer. So if you have had a DPU in your server today, this is what the picture would look like, but we are changing things up a little in vSphere 8. Essentially in vSphere 8, we are putting an additional instance of ESXi directly on the DPU itself. And this allows us to offload ESXi services, starting with some networking and security services from NSX directly onto the DPU for increased performance. And it also frees up some of the x86 compute power and allows us to give back that power to your applications and your workloads. In vSphere 8, we'll support greenfield installation with the support of network offloading with NSX. Now you might be thinking, does this mean I have got double the instance of ESXi to lifecycle manage? And the answer is really no. Because using distributed services engine, it's all lifecycle managed automatically with vSphere Lifecycle Manager. The ESXi installation on the DPU is managed easily through VLCM. When you are remediating a host, there's just still one remediation event that needs to take place. But both instances of ESXi will get remediated along with the parent host. Now to use vSphere Distributed Service Engine, you need to leverage a vSphere Distributed Switch version 8 and NSX. And with that, you can choose the network offload compatibility and select the appropriate GPU in your environment. Network services are then offloaded to the DPU, allowing for increased performance with no CPU overhead. There's also the enhanced visibility of network traffic security and protection you would expect from NSX. So that's a quick overview of the vSphere Distributed Services Engine. Next, let's look at some of the new enhancements in the area of vSphere with Tanzu. So vSphere with Tanzu was introduced in vSphere 7. And with that, it brought Tanzu Kubernetes Grid or TKG. And we ended up with some of different versions of iterations like TKGs, TKGM, and so on. In vSphere 8, we are consolidating those different Tanzu Kubernetes Grid runtimes into a single unified runtime. So it'll be the same runtime used for deploying Kubernetes on vSphere clusters, public clouds, private clouds, whatever it may be. There's also a new vSphere 8 feature called vSphere zones. And this is used to isolate workload across vSphere clusters and allows you to stretch or span multi vSphere multiple vSphere clusters for maximum availability and resource consumption. Cluster class is a declarative way to specify your cluster's configuration through the open source Cluster API project. Photon OS and Ubuntu images can now be customized and then saved back into content library for use in Tanzu Kubernetes cluster. And we are bringing Pinnapad integrations to both the supervisor cluster and TKG cluster as well for federated identity management. So I mentioned vSphere zone. This is an illustration of what vSphere zone might look like. In an environment, it allows our supervisor cluster or our Tanzu clusters to span multiple vSphere clusters for increased availability. The vSphere namespace will also span the views for zones to support Tanzu Kubernetes clusters being deployed, again for increased availability and maximum compute consumption. 3 vSphere zones is required for availability. So during workload management activation, you will have the choice to deploy across vSphere zones or deploy the single cluster option that we have today. At vSphere 8 GA, a vSphere zone has one-to-one relationship with a vSphere cluster. The cluster class is an open source specification that is part of Cluster API project, and Cluster API defines the declarative way to lifecycle manage Kubernetes clusters through an existing management cluster, and in our instance, vSphere Tanzu, the management cluster is our supervisor cluster. So cluster class provides a declarative way to define the Kubernetes cluster configuration, but now it also includes the default install packages. So the platform team can decide the infrastructure packages that needs to be installed at cluster creation. This could include anything from network, storage, and cloud provider packages as well as authentication mechanism or metrics collection. In addition to defining the default install packages after cluster deployment, DevOps user can optionally add additional packages from the Tanzu standard package repository. So they might want to include different packages for ingress for the cluster, different observability packages, and so on. And these are all managed as add-ons through the Tanzu CLI interface. So you have the full flexibility of default packages and then custom install packages after cluster deployment. We are also bringing in the Pinnapad integration to the supervisor cluster and the Tanzu Kubernetes cluster. So in vSphere 7, all authentication was performed through integration with vCenter SSO, and you can still continue to do that in vSphere 8 if you choose. But now you'll have also have an alternative with Pinnapad integration. The supervisor cluster and the Tanzu Kubernetes cluster can have direct access to the identity provider without relying on the vCenter SSO. So a single sign-on is not used as a proxy, or it's not involved in any way, shape, or form when using Pinnapad authentication. Pinnapad pods are automatically deployed in supervisor and Tanzu Kubernetes cluster. To support this diagram on screen, just illustrates a sample workflow, how the authentication workflow would occur. First, a DevOps user would use the Tanzu CLI login to authenticate to either the supervisor cluster or to their TKG cluster. Second, Pinnapad integration will federate out to the supported identity provider. The identity provider will then return to a login link or log into a Windows, and with the DevOps user will provide their identity provider credentials. Unsuccessful authentication to the identity provider that's returned to Pinnapad, and the Tanzu CLI builds the kubeconfig file needed to access the supervisor cluster or a TKG cluster. That's just a sample workflow and may be slightly different depending on the identity provider. This is the key takeaway that Pinnapad integration does not use vCenter SSO. So that's an overview of some of the new features and capabilities in vSphere with Tanzu. Next, let's look at the areas of lifecycle management. So just a quick rundown of some of the highlights, and we'll go into some of these in a little bit more detail. I mentioned DPU support earlier when talking about vSphere Distributed Services Engine. And just to remind you that when you're remediating an ESXi host that contains a DPU, which also has an instance of ESXi running on it, there's still just one remediation event, and both instances of ESXi will be remediated at the same time. Staging support and parallel remediation is coming back to vSphere Lifecycle Manager, and this will allow us to reduce and improve the overall remediation time when you're performing lifecycle operations of your cluster. vSphere configuration profiles, which will be our next generation of cluster configuration management and a future replacement of host profiles. vSphere Lifecycle Manager can now manage the image on a standalone host. So host that's not a member of our cluster through the vSphere API and vSphere compatibility guide will also list the hardware supported manager features that are compatible with VLCM features such as staging and parallel remediation. So before we dive into some of the new features, I just want to bring some deprecation awareness to your attention. So baseline lifecycle management, or what you may colloquially call update manager, is deprecated in vSphere 8. And this means that baseline lifecycle management is still supported in vSphere 8 and will support for lifecycle of vSphere 8. But the vSphere 8 will be the last release that supports baseline lifecycle management. So you'll have plenty of time to start transitioning your cluster over to using the declarative image way of doing things. And the update manager method of doing things will no longer be available in the next major release of vSphere 8. I mentioned staging is coming back to vSphere Lifecycle Manager. So we had this in the past with some of the baselines way of doing things. We now have it again with the image way of doing things. And this allows vSphere Lifecycle Manager to pre-stage the update payloads down to the ESXi host in cluster in advance of remediation event. And this is good because it reduces the overall time needed for the host to spend in maintenance mode. So previously, without staging the payloads, the actual update binaries themselves would get down to the host only after host was placed into maintenance mode. So now you can do this without the host being into maintenance mode and while it's still running your application and your virtual machines. Firmware staging can also be performed with a supported hardware support manager, and this can be dependent on the hardware support manager, which may require future updates of the own environments. And it depends on hardware component that's involved, as well as not all hardware components will support firmware payload staging. Staging your payloads is also useful in instances where you may have edge clusters or robo clusters where the link between your vCenter and ESXi may not be the most stable or high bandwidth. So you can ensure that the updates are staged locally to the ESXi host in advance, and you have more confidence that the remediation will succeed. Parallel remediation is also come back to vSphere Lifecycle Manager. And as the name suggests, it allows us to remediate multiple hosts in parallel. This will significantly reduce the overall lifecycle operation time of a cluster because you will be able to do clusters or hosts in batches in vSphere 8. The administrator need to place the desired number of hosts into maintenance mode that they wish to remediate in parallel, and vSphere administrator can choose to either remediate all the hosts in maintenance mode or define a set number of hosts. Let's say, for example, an administrator wants to remediate 2 hosts at a time, or 3 hosts at a time, or he wants to remediate all the hosts at a time. Now that the reason the vSphere administrator needs to decide how many hosts it goes into maintenance mode is we have to do some work under the hood to make a DRS a little bit more intelligent to identify what's the optimal number of hosts we can place into maintenance mode at any given point in time. So right now we are leaving it to the vSphere administrator who know their clusters and their workloads best to observe and decide the number of hosts that can go into maintenance mode at any given time.
Bilal, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned that even the hardware firmware is supported, right? I remember previously we used to download ISO from vendor recommended ISO and then build a baseline,
Mhm.
and we can attach the baseline only to the I mean, we can attach it to any cluster, but the recommendation is that if it is Dell servers, create baseline with Dell ISO and then plug it to attach it to the set of hosts or cluster with Dell servers, right? So will LCM take care of identifying if the cluster has Dell and then download the bits directly Dell, Dell or HP or vendor firmwares directly, or how is that?
No, some of the firmwares will be by default available on the hardware baselines, and some of them will have to manually download and upload it, like
Okay,
we do in the current scenario.
existing. Okay, and when you say firmware, you're talking about BIOS also, or BIOS is still managed in open
No,
house
BIOS is still managed by the hardware on the hardware side.
hardware side?
It
Just
just
the
talks about
HBA
the
and HBA
network
DPU.
drivers, network
Okay,
firmwares, or your HBA firmwares.
okay. And also in the previous slide, you had shown DPU, right?
Yeah.
So
CPK, one point I would like to mention out here, as you mentioned, right? In Lifecycle Manager, we have something called vendor add-on packs, right? So if you have a Dell, so you need to go ahead and use the vendor add-on pack. Previously, this feature was already there. I mean, in Lifecycle Manager, Update Manager, we used to download the image and then, customize it with whatever whips that we want to include, right? Now, what we are doing is we have our standard image and then vendor add-on. So you go ahead and create your own image. The vendor add-on, when you go ahead and select, you'll be able to see what is the version of vendor add-on on what kind of whips that you have part of that vendor add-on. Once you're satisfied with that, you go ahead and include that vendor add-on, and it becomes a custom image where you have the VMware standard image along with the vendor add-on. So it becomes your customized image, the one that you used to download previously.
okay. And also for DPU, also is that a separate firmware and ESXi image, or when you upgrade ESXi, the firmware automatically gets upgraded for DPU in LCM?
It automatically gets upgraded on a DPU as well. Like I
Okay.
mentioned, like a DPU also runs an set of ESXi, right? So there will be two instances of ESXi running. One is on a DPU and one is on your x86.
Yes.
So both the ESXi's will be upgraded in once. You don't have to upgrade both the ESXi separately.
Okay.
It'll still be one upgrade for your
Upgrade.
ESXi.
But do I have choice to not do DPU upgrade?
No.
Okay.
You don't have.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And Bilal, the version of ESXi on DPU, like, do we have to maintain it, or it will go through Lifecycle Manager itself? Like, whatever the version of ESXi will be there, that will automatically go to the DPU ESXi.
It works like this. Whatever ESXi version you install on that hardware, the same ESXi version will be installed on your DPU. You don't have to separately install any other versions on the DPU.
Mm,
Okay.
okay. Yeah.
So
So
that
DPU is something new. I have not. I mean, I've used DPU before, but this is something new. I'm not sure in VMUG community how many of you have used DPUs or are using DPUs in your environments here.
I'm sure hardly anyone will be using DPUs
no,
at this
this is
stage.
just a new feature introduced in vSphere. So I doubt anyone would have started using this one.
Okay, I see.
I think it got a nice use case for NSX, but it's not limited to NSX. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bilal, right?
Yeah. As of now, it is just offloading the networking traffic and networking services to the
Services.
DPUs, and
Yeah.
then and there is enhancements in pipeline for other services to be offloaded as and when we upgrade the ESXi versions.
So basically, this is to increase the performance, like handing over some of the task to DPUs.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, thanks.
Smart mix.
Thanks, Bilal. Please carry on.
Sure. So in the area of lifecycle management or backup and restore, we are introducing what we call it as a distributed key value store onto the ESXi hosts themselves. And this is going to be involved in keeping the cluster state and reconciling that information with vCenter. So up until now, we have always assumed that the vCenter is the source of truth when it comes to pretty much everything. When it comes to the configuration state in a vSphere environment, but sometimes that's not always the best approach to do things from. For example, if a vCenter is restored from backup, that backup may be a couple of days old and maybe a couple of weeks old. And there's going to be a lot of information that may have happened between the time the backup was taken and when the restore event was happened. And often the ESXi hosts have that information. So the idea behind the distributed key value store is that when vCenter is restored from backup, it will communicate with the clusters, and the clusters will reconcile the missing data to the vCenter. So vCenter can absorb that missing information between the timer when the backup was taken and the restore event has occurred. The first piece of information that we are going to be working with host cluster is host cluster membership. So what hosts are member of what clusters and so on, and that will be reconciled with additional configuration. For support in future release, so I think the best way to help understand here is we'll illustrate in an example. So if we take up this example where we have a vCenter is currently managing 2 green ESXi hosts in a diagram. So let's say the vCenter backup was taken on a Monday, and then we added more hosts to the cluster. We added a third host on Tuesday to the cluster. And then on Wednesday, we have a catastrophic issue to the vCenter, and it was completely unrecoverable, and we had to restore from backup. So vCenter gets restored from the backup that was taken on Monday. So it's essentially gone back in time. It's gone back online, and it's gone kind of question to the cluster. I have been restored. What's new? Because at this point in time, I have no awareness of the third host. So the distributed key value store will reconcile the missing information with the vCenter and allow the vCenter to update its own record with most up-to-date information and cluster state information. So that's an example how the distributed key value store will work in operation. And as I said, we are looking to build upon this to add more and different types of state and different types of configuration in future to make vCenter more resilient in the event of being restored from backup. Now it's important to know that it's not a replacement for a good frequent vCenter backups. This is just an additional recovery enhancement for the delta information between when a backup was taken and when a vCenter was restored. Now let's talk about vSphere configuration profiles. So in vSphere 8 GA, we introduced a technical preview of what we are calling vSphere configuration profiles. And as I said earlier, this is going to be our next generation of cluster configuration management and will be an eventual replacement for host profiles. But host profiles will still continue to be supported in vSphere 8. You can still use them in vSphere to their full potential. And the end goal of this configuration profile is pretty much the same as host profiles. It is to apply cluster-wide configuration, a consistent configuration across all hosts in your cluster. So the result is the same, just how we are getting there is a little bit different. Rather than defining separate entities in the form of host profiles and have them attached to the cluster, or the cluster configuration is defined and contained within the cluster object itself. So you don't have to worry about attaching anything to anything. Everything is contained within the cluster object itself.
I have a quick question here, Bilal.
Yeah,
So
sure.
we already have host profiles, right? So what is this like configuration profiles? Is it going directly to a cluster?
Yes, it's a cluster level feature. We can apply the configuration of or and some sort of profile to the entire cluster, to all the hosts in the cluster.
Okay. Okay, cool.
So we have an option to export the configuration into a JSON format, and you can import that configuration into other clusters or even other vCenters if you wish. The same principle applies that all hosts in the cluster will have a consistent configuration if there is a configuration drift that is being monitored. And it will raise an alarm and notification, and a vSphere administrator can remediate the configuration drift. vSphere configuration profile is still under active development, and future release of this will expand and enhance its support.
Bilal,
Now let's talk about,
yeah,
yeah.
one more thing about you spoke about vCenter reconciliation, right? So do we
Yeah.
need like additional configuration to enable this reconciliation?
No, it comes on the ESXi host by default as a service. You don't have to
So
do
no
some additional
additional.
configuration.
Okay, cool.
Next, let's talk about some of the areas where we are helping in consuming the hardware for use in artificial intelligence and machine learning. So AML is really fast growing area, and it's getting into all sort of industries and all sort of workloads. And those workloads are getting larger. They're working with larger models of consumption for AI/ML spaces. And one thing that these workloads is needed is hardware accelerators, and that can typically be in the form of GPU or a combination of GPU and a dedicated NIC. For example, the device groups, what we are doing is we are working with vendors. They can define some common PCI devices, either NICs and GPUs together or GPUs and GPUs together. And these may share a common PCI switch or a direct interconnect. And a direct interconnect could be something like NVIDIA's NVLink, where you have a direct bridge between two GPUs. And you're not necessarily needing to go up to the PCI switch. And these are going to be defined at the hardware layer by the hardware vendor themselves and presented to vSphere. And vSphere will discover these groups and easily be able to attach them to a virtual machine as a single unit. And this is important because for certain workloads, this needs complementary hardware devices. This takes the guesswork or the manual work out of it. For the vSphere administrator, the devices are already grouped at the hardware layer and can be presented as a single unit to the virtual machine. Now, one of our partners that will supporting the device group is NVIDIA, and they'll release an upcoming compatible driver to support device groups.
Okay, just quick question. What is the use case of combining NIC and GPU as one device group?
So that it has your like dedicated NIC and a dedicated CPU for your workload. You don't have to switch on allocate more resources from the different CPUs. You have a dedicated CPU and dedicated NIC.
Got it. Okay.
And as I said, to add this virtual machine, there's no difference or there's no change in the existing workloads. If you're adding a hardware to a virtual machine, you just have to go to your virtual machine settings and add a new hardware and a PCI device. So if there's a device group present, they'll simply be discovered and it shows in the list. So in this example, there are two device groups showing. One is for your two GPU pairing. You can see the NVLink in the name indication that they are using a direct connect. And the second one is a combination of a GPU and dedicated NIC. So depending on the workload in question, you can choose the appropriate device group that meets your workload needs. Now, vSphere DRS and vSphere HA are aware of device groups, and they will work with the device groups in terms of VM placement. So the initial placement, the DRS will make sure that VM powers on and gets placed on a host that can satisfies the device group. And your vSphere HA will always fail over the virtual machines to a host that again can satisfy the device group if available. Now, another area in the AIML space is what we are calling the device virtualization extensions. And this may not necessarily be limited to AIML workloads, but it involves virtual machines that are consuming physical hardware devices. So it does not necessarily have to be limited to AML workload. It could be any workload that is consuming a physical hardware device. And in previous releases, the end consuming physical hardware devices uses direct path IO or dynamic direct path IO, where it's limited to their mobility. Like, so you couldn't do a live vMotion, you couldn't suspend and resume a VM, you couldn't do a snapshot. So you have lost some of the virtualization benefits when you're using physical hardware using direct path IO. Now with dynamic or device virtualization extension built on dynamic direct path IO, it introduces a new framework and API so that vendors can create a new hardware-backed virtual devices that does allow for those virtualization features such as live migration, suspend, resume, and snapshot. So what this means is a new device driver will need to be developed for the ESXi host and for the guest operating system or a virtual machine with those new device virtualization extension drivers and compatible hardware. Virtual machines that are consuming these hardware-backed virtual devices can now be live migrated. Using vMotion, for example, to another compatible ESXi host. It opens up the benefit of the virtualization that we have with other virtual machines to the VMs and workload that are leveraging the hardware-backed devices. Now let's take a look at some of the enhancements in the area of guest OS and workloads. So just a quick rundown on some of the things that we'll talk about in this section. We'll go in detail on some of these. With all new versions of vSphere, we bring in a new virtual hardware version. And with this, we are up to hardware version 20. This allows for some increase in compute maximum, and it also unlocks a lot of other features that we'll talk about in this section. We introduce a virtual TPM provisioning policy, which is primarily geared up towards helping deploy Windows 11 workloads at scale. But it could be applied to any workloads or any operating system that is leveraging a virtual TPM device. We are making applications or supporting applications to make them migration aware through vMotion notifications. Enhancing the work we did with high latency sensitivity in vSphere 7 by adding high latency sensitivity with hyperthreading. We are simplifying the configuration of vNUMA, and we are increasing some compute maximum, as you might expect. So talking a little bit of virtual hardware 20, this is just an overview of the top things that hardware version 20 brings. And we have broken these things down into kind of 3 pillars. The first being virtualized hardware innovation, and with that, we are bringing in the latest Intel and AMD CPU support. We are also bringing in device virtualization extension, which we just talked about a moment ago. And we are increasing the number of direct path IO devices that a virtual machine can support in the release, which is going up to 32. In the area of guest services for application, we are introducing something new called vSphere datasets, which we'll speak about in a moment. We are allowing applications to become migration aware. With vMotion notification, we are introducing support for the latest guest operating systems, as we do with each hardware version release. In the area of performance at scale, we are allowing up to 8 vGPUs devices per virtual machine. We are introducing device groups, as we said, to make it very easy for AIML workloads to consume the right hardware, and we are introducing the high latency sensitivity with hyper-threading So we'll take a look at some of these in a little bit more detail in the upcoming slides. So the first thing we'll talk about is virtual TPM provisioning policy. And the reason why we are kind of targeting this towards Windows 11 is that Windows 11 requires a VTPM to be present in all virtual machines or physical machines. But this principle could be applied to any workload that is leveraging a VTPM device, and you are cloning a VTPM VM device that can introduce some security risk because the TPM secrets are also cloned. VTPM devices can automatically be replaced during the cloning or the template deployment operations. So this allows the best practices that each VM contain a unique TPM followed, and therefore improves the vSphere support for Windows 11 deployments at scale. So it'll allow you to deploy a Windows 11 from a template and deploy multiple Windows 11 desktops, but ensure that each instance has a unique TPM device. Now the default behavior is copy because we didn't want to change what is the default behavior in vSphere when it comes to doing a cloning. But when it comes to a TPM provisioning policy, you do have an option through a vCenter advanced setting to make the default operation be replaced when it comes down to VTPMs. So best practice would be to replace the TPM device on all the VMs during deployment from template or even during the cloning operation. Just need to be aware that if you're doing a direct one-to-one clone and a virtual machine is using features like Windows BitLocker or Windows Hello, these features use TPM-backed secrets. And if you do replace this TPM device in those instances, those Windows features may cease to function. So you need to be very careful that you're doing the right operation for your respective use case. We are also introducing something called vSphere vMotion notification in vSphere 8. So we often take vMotion for granted. Very seamlessly, it can migrate a running virtual machine from one ESXi host to another, or even from one vCenter to another vCenter. And for the most part, virtual machines and applications running within them are completely transparent, that they don't have any awareness that the migration has occurred, and they will happily continue working and running without any bump or whatsoever. But there are certain applications that cannot tolerate the stun times associated with peaceful vMotion. These stuns are in milliseconds, but there are some applications that are extremely sensitive, like voice over IP applications could result in calls getting dropped. With clustered application, it may interfere with the heart beating and can cause unintended failovers. For example, with vSphere vMotion notification, we are allowing to happen in that ESXi will send a notification to a virtual machine when vMotion event has triggered. And using VMware tools with the guest operating system, an application can intercept the notification and be told a vMotion has been triggered, and the application can perform some work. And this could be anything from stopping a service to quashing the application to graceful failover or whatever it may be. And there is a configurable timeout as well, where the application can decide a certain amount of time in seconds or minutes to perform this work, after which the vMotion will simply occur. Now it's important to know that application can decline or prevent the migration from happening, but it can just delay it up until a defined timeout value. No, application need to be rewritten to support the vMotion notifications natively. So that's something not the application are compatible with out of the box, or your partner application could be written like a small Python script that intercepts the vMotion notification and can interface with the main application to perform any work needed. The notification allows the vMotion to complete, but as I said, if the application does not respond within the defined timeout value, which is user configurable, the vMotion is just going to happen regardless. Another important aspect to be aware when you're using vMotion notification is that it's for a particular virtual machine, they are automatically excluded from automatic DRS load balancing migration. So you will still be able to manually migrate a virtual machine. You will still be able to put a host into maintenance mode, and it will automatically migrate. But runtime DRS automatically load balancing these VMs will be excluded from that equation. Another feature to help support this very sensitive application, primarily for example in telco space, they often require increased support for latency sensitivity application. We introduced high latency sensitivity in previous releases, and in vSphere 8, we are introducing high latency sensitivity with support of hyperthreading. And this is designed to support those hyper-threaded workloads and deliver improved performance for those workloads. And this means when enabled that the virtual machines, vCPUs are scheduled on the same hyper-threaded physical core rather than being potentially spread across multiple cores. And this is a feature that requires virtual machine hardware version 20. And it is easily configurable in virtual machine settings under the latency sensitivity section. Another area for those kind of niche workloads are very sensitive workloads that you want to squeeze a lot of performance out of it. We also have a simplified vNUMA configuration. So vNUMA has existed since I think vSphere 8 and up. Until now, you are using advanced parameters or CLI based options. But now with these for vSphere 8 and hardware version 20, the vNUMA technology is exposed to vSphere client. So it's very easily configurable right from your UI. And you can also manually assign devices to vNUMA nodes from your UI. There's also a handy tile right on your VM summary page to illustrate the current CPU topology. vSphere datasets is the last feature we'll speak about in this topic. And this is a new way for small, infrequently changing data to be shared between vSphere management layer and the guest operating system. Some use cases for this might include things like guest deployment status, where an application might be writing its current status to vSphere dataset. And that can be read from the vSphere using the vSphere API, or vSphere administrator could push some configuration parameters to a dataset that could be consumed by the virtual machine. This communication is bidirectional, but you can also control with proper permissions. You can define who has a read access or no access at all. It could be something that just a vSphere administrator can see and the guest operating system cannot. vSphere data sets are stored with virtual machine file. So there's a new file called .dsd, and that's stored with the virtual machine files, and it will travel with the virtual machine. So if you do a migration between clusters or between hosts or between vCenters, the vSphere datasets will travel with the virtual machine, and these vSphere datasets can be defined and created by the vSphere administrator, even when the virtual machine is powered off. But obviously, for the guest operating system to interface with the dataset, it needs to be powered on. And it needs to have a virtual machine, VMware tools installed and running that is require hardware version 20. Now, just a quick note on vSphere scalability. With each release, we try and push the boundaries of scalability. And in vSphere 8, vSphere Lifecycle Manager can now manage the image for the full cluster size of 96 hosts per cluster. Keep in mind the vSAN cluster size limits of 64 hosts that still remains true. We can now have up to 10,000 VMs per cluster. We saw that we are increasing some vGPUs resources also. For all the configuration maximums for the vSphere 8, you can check out configmax.vmware.com. Now, just a couple of brief notes in the area of resource management. First one being some enhanced DRS performance with vSphere memory monitoring and remediation with a version 2. So we introduced VMMR in vSphere 7 update 3. And in vSphere 8, the DRS performance is significantly improved by better leveraging these memory statistics, and it results more optimal placement decisions by DRS for VMs without affecting the performance or resource consumption. We are also introducing vSphere Green metrics. There are 3 new metrics that will monitor the energy and carbon equivalent emission of the vSphere infrastructure and workloads. You will be able to take these metrics, combine them with your own data on your energy consumption from your energy provider, and be able to illustrate that the carbon emission equivalent of your infrastructure, both at the host level and the virtual machine level. So there are 3 new metrics. One, to calculate the power capacity and the usage of the virtual machines, how much power the workloads are using. Second one, the power capacity of usage system, how much power is just being used by the ESXi system activity, or everything the host is using that is not attributed to VMs. The power capacity usage idle, how much power is consuming just by the host sitting idle, and your VMware ARIA operations will be able to ingest these metrics and illustrate the carbon intensity, carbon emission rate, and even do some predictive models of where this being, whether this is being trend or not. And lastly, we'll touch on some of the errors that we are making improvements in the area of security and compliance. We always make a vSphere more secure by default. And so as the release goes on, these kind of topics become, I suppose, less and less verbose, because we are more secure out of the box, and along with some of things like VTM provisioning policy. vSphere 8 also builds on virtual SGX support by taking advantage of the latest updates from Intel. We are going to speak in TLS 1.2 in vSphere 8. Now, this is how in vSphere 7 operates. But today, you still have an option to fall back to 1.0 or 1.1. But in vSphere 8, it is TLS 1.2 or nothing, and there is no fallback option. One of the biggest things we have done is to prevent untrusted binaries from running. So this means that no executables can run on ESXi unless they have been installed from a signed package or a signed web. So this makes it that some custom build webs may need to get updated, may need to get signed, but it also means that no rogue web can be installed. You can back out of this setting, and if you do for whatsoever reason, there is an undismissible alarm. So that's a big clue that someone has turned this off, and we don't recommend doing so unless there's a guidance from VMware support. We always recommend that you leave SSH disabled. You know, it's a pretty big attack vector. If it's left enabled, unless you're doing some troubleshooting or you're again with VMware support. So to help encourage, we are introducing an automatic timeout for SSH where it will disable itself. Again, this timeout is configurable, so you know you can work with it. So that I won't interfere with that you're doing when you need to have the SSH enabled. With that, just in general, we are making vSphere more secure out of the box. For everything in terms of security, you can check out the vSphere 8 security configuration guide, which is now part of vSphere documentation. But you can find it where it's always been there on core.vmware.com. With some of other compliance guidance like design stake, we have rebranded a new modernized Power CLI examples in it to make life easier. The guide is available with vSphere 8 and it's updated with every release. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bilal. I must say that lot of new features here with the vSphere 8. I actually started my journey with the vSphere 5 and had bit of vSphere 4, but lot of new features have come up, and I think plan here is to go close to kind of a super cloud story. What Prasanna uh, I explained earlier. So that's where VMware is going. And now I would like to share my screen with everyone. I've got a very wonderful document on core.vmware.com, and I think that can be the starting point for anyone who wants to start their journey for vSphere 8. Let me know, PPK, if you can see my screen.
Yes, yep, we can see.
Okay, so this is all what Bilal explained to all of us around vSphere distributed service engine, Tenzu, the lifecycle management, AI, ML, and all that stuff, including security and compliances as well. So I really found this article as well to be. I mean, this can be a starting point here, Bilal. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but this can be the starting point. And I was also looking into the ICM if that's available. So ICM install configure management for vSphere 8 is also available. So if anyone wants to look into the training side of it, you can also explore that on-demand course from MyLearn. And I was actually looking for some hands-on labs, but Bilal, keep us informed once the hands-on labs are available for vSphere 8. I would like to convey that to Chandigarh VMUG community and to everyone actually. So once that's ready, because hands-on labs are really nice way to learn all these new things, because DPUs and all that features coming in with Tenzu, and even the lifecycle management has changed a lot. So I think I mean, this session was a bit heavy for the community, but I think everyone who is interested to learn more around vSphere 8 has to start somewhere. So once that hands-on labs will be ready, uh, please keep us posted, and we'll further inform everyone about it. So now if
Sure.
anyone has any questions for Bilal or for Prasanna around SuperCloud and the vSphere 8, please feel free to um, ask your queries, or you can put it in a Q&A section as well.
Bilal?
Yeah.
On the TPM part, actually, I mean, normally the TPM comes with the hardware, right? And then you will have to enable the TPM on the hardware side, then you need it also on the virtual side. So the new feature what we have talked about, I mean, every hardware has the same TPM. So I mean, can you just, I was just confused with that, the TPM policy. If you, I mean, you're saying was like each host can have a different TPM policy. That means each host can come with a different TPM.
No,
Or
I was referring to the TPM secrets. Each TPM secrets will be different, and when you're doing a cloning with the TPM for the virtual, with the TPM on that virtual machine, there is a chance that TPM secret may get cloned, which we don't want to happen. So in order to have avoid that, we are just introducing a setting in advanced option of a virtual machine that we can regenerate a new secret for that cloned VM or a VM which is being deployed from the VM template.
Okay.
We are just concerned about the TPM secrets.
Okay, makes sense. And about that vMotion for the application,
vMotion notifications.
notifications here. So it is like, I mean,
No, we can't hear you, Vikar. We can't hear you. Your voice is too low.
Can you hear me now properly?
Yeah.
Okay. So so in what use cases that would trigger normally, if there's HA totally, HA triggers, then vMotion already
This vMotion
there's already
notification.
there's already alarms on the vCenter side. So
with
this
vMotion
notification
notification, it notifies your guest operating system. See, previously with vMotion, you are just getting notified on a vCenter level. On the application layer or the guest operating system layer, you're not knowing what is happening on the virtual machine side, right? With vMotion notification, your application gets notified that there is a vMotion gonna happen on this virtual machine. And if that is enabled, and if there's some sensitive application that it wants to do some coasing of some IOs, or it wants to extend the vMotion activity, in that case, the operating system and the application do the settings and delay the vMotion on the vSphere layer. This is what the vMotion notification does. Previously, it was not.
Okay.
It was just application wasn't aware of the vMotion, right?
Yeah.
So can I add a little bit here, Bilal?
Yes, sure, Akshay. Yeah, please go. Thank you.
Mohammed, these notifications are not really alerts that you see in vCenter UI, right?
Okay.
These are application constructs, right? So let's say you are a developer, right? And your application is capable of receiving notifications, right? You have developed, most distributed system has notification buses, right? Like RabbitMQ is one of them, right?
Yep.
So vMotion can now push a notification in the applications that support notifications that a vMotion is starting up for the VM where this application is running, right? So let's say Microsoft SQL, it's not notification aware as of now, but let's say Microsoft SQL becomes notification aware, right?
Okay.
Then once vMotion starts, it will push a notification through VMware tools and Microsoft SQL's notification bus. Microsoft SQL will pick up that notification and can act on it. And that action could be that it will flush all its IO quickly so that it does not get impacted by vMotion. So this can be one of the use cases of this.
Okay. Makes sense. Yeah. I mean, so if a cluster is imbalanced and then, if that particular VM is getting vMotion, it notifies that particular application and then it moves. Okay. Makes sense. Yeah. Thanks, Akshay.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi, Bhavesh here. Am I audible?
Yes, Bhavesh.
Yes, Bhavesh.
Yeah, my question is on DPU. When we say DPU is offloading many compute resources, but if we are looking at VMware 7, or you can say 7 requirement and the vSphere 8 requirements, still requirement is higher than 7. So what exactly the workloads are DPU carrying then?
So right now, the only services which are being offloaded to DPU is in this GA releases like only NSX and networking services. See, other compute services are still being managed by your x86 architecture. Only the NSX and networking services are being offloaded.
Okay, and in future, any plan to replace boss cards with DPU or things like that, or still boss card will be there?
I have no idea about that, to be honest, whether what will be replaced in the upcoming, but definitely there will be enhancement made for offloading some of the other services.
Okay.
Akshay again.
When you say boss card, are you talking about the RAID controller?
Yeah.
Boss card is
Okay.
for not the RAID controller, but it's OS installation, means ESXi installation, which we were using SD cards, but now it's recommended to have the boss cards for ESXi installation. Yeah.
Okay, no, this is completely DPU.
This is,
yeah.
Yes. Can I add Prasanna again?
Yeah. I'll let Akshay add. Yeah.
Yeah. So DPUs are a very specific hardware that is coming from NVIDIA, right? So I'm not sure how many of us have heard about smart NICs, right? One of the things that DPU does is smart NICs kind of products where network functions can be offloaded completely to a NIC. There's a NIC which will be running CPU, memory, and it can be having its own OS. So all the networking functions from ESX can go sit inside that network card itself, right? And then other DPU units are something which are required for processing massive amount of data, like matrix multiplication and things like that. So they are equivalent to GPUs, right? So if you are doing something which requires a lot of GPUs and machine learning kind of hardware, right? Then DPUs will come into picture for you. DPU is data processing units.
Yeah. Thank you.
So boss card is a storage. DPU is not really a storage. You can compare it to a GPU or a NIC. A very powerful NIC.
Yeah. Okay. I think I misunderstood, because in initial, I think when the DPU explanation started, while computing, it was also mentioned like storage and networks and things like that. That's why. Maybe I misunderstood. Okay.
There at some point there can be certain amount of storage functionality as well that can be offloaded, but storage functionality that will be offloaded is, let's say you have FC card, right? Now
Yes.
a lot of FC card functions still run within the operating system, right? Let's talk about like multipathing software, right? Now multipathing software has, when you have FC, multipathing software still needs to run within an operating system. When these DPUs evolve enough, you can technically in future offload these kinds of work directly to the hardware. The multipathing software will sit within the card itself that you are deploying. So these are possibilities. Some of this is still on drawing boards with NVIDIA, not really out there yet, but this is what DPUs will be capable of in future.
Yeah, got your point.
Yeah, and Bhavesh, that's a good question, because not everyone is aware of DPUs yet, and thanks for asking that. I believe once the cards are enough cards are in the market and people start deploying in the enterprise and everyone gets hands-on, I guess we'll all be thinking what this.
I currently have a DPU unit on my screen. If you want, I can share what DPU is.
Okay.
Would be great, Akshay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
This is what a DPU looks like.
Okay.
So it's something like a PCI card, but much more powerful than a PCI card. It's
much more smarter.
So smart NICs are the first applications of DPUs, but there are many more on drawing boards with NVIDIA and some other companies as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thanks, Akshay. Anyone else have any questions for Bilal, Akshay, for PPK?
And regarding the TLS 1.2, does it also applies to guest operating systems, or it will be within the ESXi?
That will be at the ESXi layer.
Yeah. Okay.
And just to add to it, right? So vSphere 8.0 does not support SHA-1 based certificates as well. Like if you have older certificates with SHA-1 encryption, right? Those as well are a no-go kind of a thing. If you try to upgrade a vCenter server which has an SHA-1 certificate in it, it will just refuse to get upgraded. It will throw an error and say weak ciphers detected and will not progress further.
Okay, might be it will be in the pre-checks, it will fail.
Upgrade pre-checks, yes. It's an upgrade pre-check that the moment you click on install, it says, okay, pre-checking. And after that, there will be a screen which will say weak ciphers detected in your environment. Can't continue.
Yeah, I think Vikar has sent some links. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about the short videos from VMware side.
Yeah,
it's good, better explained in a more practical use case. If you want to have to do deep dive, you can check into those things, videos, short videos.
Yeah,
Okay, that's great.
thanks, Vigar, for that. Okay, I think we can end the today's session here. But it was really wonderful to understand that super cloud story from you, PPK, and Bilal. Great job. I mean, to me, it was too much. I think I'll be watching this video 2-3 times to digest all vSphere 8 stories. But thanks a lot for your time for making it possible for us. I think vSphere 8 is at this stage quite new to everyone. So down the line, I mean, people will keep learning, keep upskilling themselves, and will reach to a point wherein vSphere 8 will be handy for everyone. So thanks a lot, Bilal, for that. Before we end up the session, actually, I've got a box full of goodies. Not sure if you can see it properly. So there are a lot of goodies here. I mean, some VMware merchandise like bottles, these coffee mugs, and there are a few t-shirts as well. So I'll get in touch with some of you who have made this session, um, who have added value to the session and have made it interactive. So I'll get in touch with some of you, and will soon deliver, would love to deliver these goodies to your doorstep. But yeah, thanks a lot everyone for your time, and we'll catch up for another interesting and session. It might be from VMware, or we'll also approach our like VMware partners. And if even if you are interested, any one of you are interested to deliver a session on something wherein you feel like community will be interested to listen, please feel free to reach out to myself, to Prasanna or Akshay. We would love to bring you on board as well. Before we go ahead, just want to share. Sorry, apologize. My other screen is not working at the moment. But yeah, these are the LinkedIn uh, uh, profiles from Akshay, myself, and Prasanna. And in case you have any feedback, feel free to write to us at asiarcl@vmug.com. So that belongs to me at the moment. So feel free to share your feedbacks here. Anything from anyone now, or should?
No, that's good. I just want to say this is good that we meet like this, so that we get instead of watching video and understanding vSphere here, you can get things clarified with experts from the industry.
Yeah.
Not just VMware. We have pipeline of experts coming in and talking in VMUG sessions in coming days from across the industry, who can add value to VMUG group. And feel free to nominate yourself if you would like to present something to the community, and then we'd be more than happy to schedule the sessions for you.
Yeah,
right?
thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot,
Thank you very
PPK.
much.
Any like few words from Akshay from your side, or Bilal, or anyone
Yes,
actually?
great work, guys. Like a lot of people are coming to know about what VMware does, how things work, learning and all. This is a great opportunity. And I really like to encourage people, like if you have anything that you want to share, if you wanna come up with some of your stories of how you use VMware to solve your business problems, right? Like we tell what VMware can do, right? But it's always the customer who builds a story around what was their problem and how they use VMware stuff to solve that problem. And that story can also make a great addition here.
Yeah, definitely would love to hear some of those stories from our community members. So if you are using VMware in your portfolio, I mean, even if your story is not around vSphere 8, I mean, if it's still vSphere 7, doesn't matter, but please share your stories with the community, and that's a great platform to share, and wherein we can learn all together. But yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. Akshay, Prasanna, Bilal, Pavan, thank you, everyone. And we'll catch up soon for another VMUG session. And Akshay, we'll get hold of you to get some more understanding on what's happening within VMware so that we can bring the best for the community. And yes, I'll reach out to some of you for these giveaways as well. Thank you. Thanks a lot,
Thank you.
everyone, for your
Thanks,
time.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.